Victory for religious freedom. EWTN wins its nearly 7-year-long court case against the HHS contraception mandate. We have reaction. A new deal. President Trump reaches a trade agreement with Canada and Mexico as the G20 summit kicks off in Argentina. Religious liberty in Pakistan. Pope Francis honors the legacy of a Pakistani Catholic politician who could one day become a saint. And drinking with Saint Nick. Ahead of Christmas, we talk to the author of a new recipe book who has Christmas cocktails for both sinners and saints. On EWTN News Nightly for Friday, November 30th, 2018. Good evening from Washington, D.C., and thank you for joining us for News from a Catholic Perspective. I'm Wyatt Goolsby, in for Lauren Ashburn. EWTN wins its lawsuit against the Obama administration's contraceptive mandate. The rule required companies to cover contraception, sterilization, and abortion-inducing drugs in their health care plans. Correspondent Jason Calvi explains this religious freedom victory. Good evening, Jason.
Good evening, Wyatt. The U.S. Court of Appeals for the 11th Circuit vacated or set aside a 2014 decision against EWTN. It comes after the Department of Justice and the network reached a settlement last month. It provided the network protection both now and in the future. But it's not the end of the story for defenders of religious liberty.
The settlement means the government has acknowledged that it didn't have the authority to do what it tried to do to EWTN.
Beckett Law, a firm specializing in religious freedom, defended EWTN in court and today claims victory.
The government tried 7 years ago to force EWTN to say one thing, to uphold its Catholic teachings on abortion, and yet do another and provide for the week after pill in their health care plan. And finally, after 7 years, the courts have made it clear and the government has admitted that they had no right to do that.
Name of Jesus, who is Lord, may his eternal word be proclaimed.
The network, started by Mother Angelica in 1981, sued the Obama administration back in 2012. Its contraceptive mandate required employers to cover all FDA-approved contraception. EWTN lost in court 3 times. Things changed in 2016 after the Supreme Court sided with the Little Sisters of the Poor.
The burden is the burden on our conscience of having to collaborate with something that we consider to be morally objectionable and evil.
President Trump promised to protect the Little Sisters and other religious groups at his first National Day of Prayer in May of 2017.
We will not allow people of faith to be targeted, bullied, or silenced anymore.
But that support does not translate into relief for the 19 plaintiffs in remaining cases. For them, the legal battle goes on.
The Supreme Court told the government to go back and do better, and the government has now done that. They've taken the Supreme Court seriously and created exemptions that respect religious freedom. And now states are trying to challenge that. I think those state challenges are meritless and they're going to lose.
In fact, California and Pennsylvania are fighting the Trump administration's exemption that provides relief to the Little Sisters. So the community is still under legal threat. In total, 101 lawsuits were filed against the mandate by companies and groups like EWTN, the Little Sisters, and the craft chain Hobby Lobby. Wyatt?
Correspondent Jason Calvi reporting. Thanks, Jason. Joining me now is EWTN Chairman and Chief Executive Officer Michael Warsaw. Michael, thank you for coming on. This is a huge win for EWTN, and it's been a long battle. What's your reaction now that it's over?
Well, I'm certainly excited. I'm certainly grateful. It's been 7 years, really, since we filed the first lawsuit. And when we began, I never imagined that it would take 7 years to really get to this point. So it's an exciting day. It's a great victory, not just for EWTN, but I think for religious liberty in general. This was an important case and an important fight to have. And I'm just grateful that both the government and the courts really finally came to the point where they accepted the argument that EWTN had been making all along, which was that the Obamacare HHS mandate was unconstitutional, that it was a violation of our religious liberty, and they finally came to that point in this decision.
And like you're saying, this has widespread implications. It's not just for EWTN. Why do you think that is? What do you think is going to happen with other court cases?
Well, I hope that our decision, which is, now one of the other series of decisions that have come down on this matter in the same way. I hope it's a catalyst for the resolution of the other outstanding cases that are out there. I think there was a lot of belief and hope that when the president signed his executive order months ago, and with the new administration coming into office at the last election, that these sorts of matters would sort of go away, or that they had been really resolved. And the reality is that for most institutions that had filed suit, and for most organizations that were objecting to the mandate, none of that really resolved anything for those cases like ours. And so I'm hopeful that ours provides a little bit more momentum for settlement.
Sure. How do you think this case will impact other cases that are facing huge fines and legal fees? I mean, in the sense that, we're facing some of that same problem. People just want to live their faith, essentially.
Right. Well, certainly with regard to the mandate, the implications of not having protection from the mandate are that the government was able to fine institutions or organizations that refused to comply what amounted to, in the case of EWTN, millions and millions of dollars a year. They were crushing fines that really were a death penalty for businesses and organizations who chose to stand up for their strongly held beliefs. So by reaching this resolution, the settlement with the government and the subsequent court action, I'm hopeful that sends a message to other organizations that there's hope for them as well, that they won't suffer from those fines and penalties as well.
It's so interesting, and I know that you've been praying about this, and so many people have been praying for EWTN and all of those other organizations facing similar court cases. So it's interesting to have you come on and talk to us about it. EWTN Chairman and Chief Executive Officer Michael Warsaw, thanks so much for your input.
Thanks so much.
President Trump moves closer to fulfilling a major campaign promise. He teamed up with the leaders of Canada and Mexico to sign a revised North American trade deal. But the president still needs lawmakers to approve the plan. White House correspondent Mark Irons reports. Good evening, Mark.
Good evening, Wyatt. President Trump is boasting about this replacement to NAFTA, falsely calling it the largest trade deal in history. He held a signing ceremony in Argentina today where he's participating in the G20 summit. Now, the path to finalizing the deal isn't clear, and today the Canadian Prime Minister is sharing his concerns.
NAFTA, no more. North American leaders sign a new trade pact, the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement.
The USMCA is the largest, most significant, modern, and balanced trade agreement in history.
President Trump promising great benefits for all three countries, calling it an amazing deal for U.S. farmers and predicting auto jobs sent overseas will be coming back.
This is an agreement that, first and foremost, benefits working people.
On his last day in office, outgoing Mexican President Enrique Peña Nieto says the agreement improves the rights of workers.
Reaching a new free trade agreement with the United States and Mexico is a major step for our economy.
Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau added measured praise, minus his call for President Trump to stop taxing U.S. imports from Mexico and Canada.
And Donald, it's all the more reason why we need to keep working to remove the tariffs on steel and aluminum between our countries.
Hurdles remain after today's ceremonial signing. Lawmakers in all three countries must approve the new trade deal.
I don't expect to have very much of a problem.
But an optimistic President Trump will be dealing with a divided U.S. Congress. And Senate Democrat Chuck Schumer says in order to get the needed support, the USMCA trade deal must prove to be a net benefit to middle-class families and working people in our country, and must have strong labor and environmental protections, which in the present deal are too weak.
Another trade deal remains in question. Today, President Trump said he thinks the U.S. would like to reach a new agreement with China. President Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping will have dinner tomorrow night. We'll see if they can smooth over the current dispute over tariffs between their two countries. Wyatt?
White House correspondent Mark Irons reporting. Thanks, Mark. The Archdiocese of Santa Fe says it will file for bankruptcy soon. The church in New Mexico has settled numerous claims of clergy abuse and says it is close to depleting its reserves. Around 20 dioceses and religious orders in the U.S. have filed for bankruptcy protection as a result of misconduct claims. West Virginia's only Catholic diocese releases the names of 18 priests or deacons credibly accused of child sex abuse. The allegations in Wheeling, Charleston date from 1950. 11 of those on the list are deceased. None of the others is in active ministry. The Archdiocese of Omaha releases a list of 38 priests and other clergy members credibly accused of sexual misconduct. The state's top prosecutor had requested the information. The allegations date from 1978. Officials say all 38 have either died or been removed from the clergy. Spain rescues 650 migrants from the Strait of Gibraltar. At least one woman in the group died. They were using the Mediterranean Sea to cross from North Africa and enter Europe illegally. Nearly 2,000 migrants have died on that route so far this year. Chile's president signs a bill permitting people age 14 or older to change their name and gender. The law is part of an agreement signed in 2016 between the state and a gay and transgender group. The South American country is majority Catholic. Pope Francis praises a Catholic Pakistani politician killed in 2011.
Il mio saluto a tutti I cristiani del Pakistan.
Pope Francis met with Shahbaz Bhatti Mission and sent his greetings to all Christians in Pakistan. The group promotes the safety of religious minorities in the Muslim country. Vatican correspondent Juliet Lindley joins us from Rome. Juliet, remind us, who was Shahbaz Bhatti?
Wyatt, he was Pakistan's Minister for Minority Affairs from 2008 until he was assassinated in 2011 at the age of 42. At the time, he was the only Christian member of Pakistan's cabinet, and the Taliban claimed responsibility for his death, declaring him a blasphemer because of his Christian faith. Now, today, the Holy Father said that he's delighted that Bhatti is loved and respected in his home country. Bhatti's cause for sainthood was opened by the Diocese of Islamabad, Rawalpindi in 2016, and he is now a servant of God, the first key step to canonization.
And I understand Shahbaz Bhatti's brother, Paul, was present today, and you spoke with him about the case of Asia Bibi. She's a Catholic in Pakistan who has been freed on blasphemy charges. What did he tell you?
Indeed, Wyatt, Paul Bhatti tells me that Pope Francis told him personally he's happy Bibi is free and says that such cases should never happen again in Pakistan. Bhatti said that he was pleased. The Pope also offered his support for religious minorities in Pakistan. Now, Bhatti is in touch with Asia Bibi's husband and daughters, he told me, and he seemed to think that it'll be just a matter of weeks before she is allowed to leave the country. He said that the international community's role in offering support were of great help.
And of course, the Vatican is following the status of Asia Bibi very closely. What is the situation at the moment? We hear her family is in great danger.
Earlier this year, the Pope received Bibi's husband and one of her daughters to the Vatican. Now that she's free, attention is focused on her safety and getting her family out of Pakistan. According to a Catholic organization that helps persecuted Christians, Aid to the Church in Need, Asia Bibi's two daughters are in danger. They're constantly receiving death threats and they've had to move house 4 times. Their mother and father are being held in an undisclosed location, Wyatt, under the protection of the government. But there is no update on if or when the family might be granted asylum in Europe or the US. One possibility is Italy, but again, Wyatt, there's no confirmation on that front as yet.
Okay, well, I know our audience will be praying for Bibi, her family, and for all of those Christians who have been persecuted in Pakistan. Juliet Lindley, EWTN News Nightly Vatican correspondent. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Wyatt.
The Vatican Bank has been approved to join the European banking system that harmonizes electronic payments across the continent. It means cheaper and faster transactions. The move is seen as a sign of progress for the Vatican in its path to greater financial transparency. Catholic priests in Poland blessed new Black Hawk helicopters for the police. The prayers took place during a ceremony in Warsaw. It's one example of the close relationship between the government and the church. Poland is nearly 90% Catholic. Coming up, we break down this week's news with Michael Knowles, a conservative political commentator. Welcome back. I'm Wyatt Goolsby, in for Lauren Ashburn. The former Trump campaign chairman may face additional charges after lawyers in the Special Counsel's Russia investigation says he lied to them and broke his plea deal. Paul Manafort denies the claims. The news comes one day after the president's former lawyer pleaded guilty to misleading Congress. Michael Cohen now says he lied about Donald Trump's pursuit of a real estate project in Moscow in 2016. He says he did so to remain consistent with the then candidate's messaging. Joining me now by Skype from New York City is Michael Knowles of the Daily Wire and host of the Michael Knowles Show. So in your view, does the news about Paul Manafort and Michael Cohen call into question the president's character here?
Absolutely not. It calls into question the legitimacy of the Mueller investigation. Are Mueller and Michael Cohen, or I'm sorry, are Manafort and Michael Cohen dodgy people? Yes, of course. People who work in politics and in real estate and in law can be dodgy people, absolutely. But the trouble that Mueller has right now in his investigation is that every major crime that he's getting these Trump aides on is lying, to making false statements to investigators. And so he's saying Michael Cohen lied, Paul Manafort lied. Manafort lied, he got a plea deal, he lied about the plea deal. And now all of these liars are to be believed. Now they're suddenly honest, and we should believe that they're telling the truth because we're offering them a bargain to get out of prison if they tell the story that we want to tell. And the problem is, if they had been able to get these guys on any actual crime relating to the Trump campaign in Russia, they would have a lot more credibility. But if the only crime they get them on is lying, why on earth should we believe them now?
So let's look ahead now. I want to switch gears. Many pro-life Americans don't want their tax dollars funding Planned Parenthood. Pro-life lawmakers in Congress have not been able to deliver on that. Do you think that's because there's a disconnect between the politicians and what regular folks want?
There absolutely is. This is what President Trump supporters refer to as draining the swamp. We've seen this. We know politicians down there in D.C., and very often they feel that they have much more in common, even if they're Republican, even if they say they're conservative. They have more in common with the people who are on the coasts, who are only interested in fiscal matters, economic matters, who don't care about cultural issues. But culture is what matters. And what you've seen time and again in recent elections is we have been throwing these guys out. The majority of Americans oppose taxpayer funding for abortion. And if even the Republican lawmakers on the Hill can't get behind that and do something on it, the trend lines don't look very good for them having a much longer tenure in their offices.
Michael, you're Catholic. I want to very quickly get your reaction to EWTN's victory in the legal battle against the HHS contraceptive services mandate.
This is a wonderful victory, long overdue. I am so pleased that it could happen. My congratulations to EWTN. I just saw today at my dear, poor alma mater of Yale that Yale is now installing vending machines in dormitories to sell Plan B abortifacient drugs. This is clearly moving in a radical cultural direction. The science is clear. There is a period of time during which these drugs, such as Plan B and certainly others, can cause abortions, can cause embryos that have already been created to not implant and to be destroyed. A major win. If we can not exercise our conscience, our religious liberty, to not give our money toward killing young babies in this country, there is no religious liberty left. So fortunately, that liberty on which our country is founded has been preserved for another day, and EWTN has done a lot to help to advance that.
Such a lot of important ideas there. Michael Knowles, host of the Michael Knowles Show, thanks so much for talking with us.
Thanks for having me.
A new survey shows Mormon voters nationwide favored the GOP in the midterm elections. The study for the Associated Press says 67% voted for Republicans, but 56% said they approve of the way Trump is handling his job as president. Among Catholics, nearly half said they voted Republican and said they approved of President Trump. A state health panel rules against a group trying to open an abortion clinic in South Bend, Indiana. Supporters of the clinic say the Republican-dominated government has reduced abortion access, but pro-life supporters applaud the decision. Up next, we talk with the author of the new book, Drinking with St. Nick.
Pubblicità. Fare pubblicità per...
Pope Francis challenges us to tell others about Christ, but not through advertising. At his daily Mass at the Vatican, the Holy Father says we will convert people based on how we live our own lives every day. Welcome back. I'm Wyatt Goolsby, in for Lauren Ashburn. Catholics in Arlington, Virginia and Knoxville, Tennessee are praying for their bishops as they face health challenges. Bishop Richard Stitka will soon be undergoing a heart procedure, and Bishop Michael Burbidge is recovering after a surgery for prostate cancer. A new book connects the saints with spirits, so to speak. Drinking with St. Nick presents stories of some of the church's most beloved figures, paired with holiday cocktail recipes and a wet Advent calendar. Joining me now is the book's author, Michael Foley. Michael, this book is a sequel to your previous one, Drinking with the Saints. A lot of people are hesitant about connecting saints with alcohol here. But you say Catholicism and celebration kind of go hand in hand. Explain what you mean by that.
Oh, absolutely. This book and Drinking with the Saints before it are in no way meant to encourage any kind of immoderate use. As a matter of fact, just the opposite, that my belief is that true festivity is something that is conducive to moderation. And that is why there is no historic opposition between Catholic piety and the responsible use of alcohol. And that includes the saints. Some of them were teetotalers, but certainly not all of them.
And so it's interesting because, like I say, not many people necessarily connect saints with spirits in that sense.
Right.
So tell us about this book in particular, St. Nick and Cocktails for the Christmas Season.
So Drinking with St. Nick pairs beer, wine, and cocktail suggestions with basically every day of the Advent and Christmas seasons.
What kind of reaction do you get from your books?
Oh, overwhelmingly positive. And even non-Catholics, I teach at Baylor University, which is the world's oldest and largest Baptist university. Mm-hmm. And even my Baptist colleagues really appreciate the book. They appreciate, it is lighthearted, but it's not irreverent, and it follows the church calendar. So you learn about the saints, and you take their stories seriously, and then you raise a glass in their honor.
Do you see that as a way to sort of evangelize, in a sense, to people who may not know the Catholic faith?
It absolutely is a tool of evangelization. I gave a talk at a parish in New Jersey, and the pastor told me that this was the most important tool of evangelization that he had had in a number of years. And he said, when I have friends who are sort of fallen away Catholics, and I give them a book on the saints, a wall goes up. When I give them a book on drinking, a wall goes down.
It's it's at least approachable. People can look at this.
It's very approachable, so it's a gentle way of sort of introducing people to the communion of saints.
Tell us what inspired you to write your books. I mean, where'd you get all the stories? Of course, like I said, a lot of stories about the saints, but then you have unique recipes for cocktails and other drinks as well.
We do. Once we got started, we took this project quite seriously, and by we I mean my wife and several friends who were eager collaborators. And that to me was the big joy of researching both these books, was learning about new saints that I didn't know about before and stories I hadn't heard before. That was a really lovely experience.
And like you mentioned in the book, you mentioned Advent, of course Christmas is coming up. Tell us just in general for you, who's someone who's Catholic, what does the season mean for you?
It means a lot more thanks to the research of this book, because what I discovered was our ancestors observed these seasons so much better than we do today. And what I discovered was Advent, as you might expect, was a period of restraint. It wasn't Lent, so it wasn't necessarily total abstinence, but it was a period of restraint and preparation. And the idea was that you got all of your work out of the way by December 21st, 22nd, 23rd. And then you celebrated the 12 days of Christmas, which meant 12 days of merriment, 12 days of abstaining from manual labor. The courts were closed, the shops were closed. It was 12 days of pure festivity. And now...
Yeah, far cry from all the shopping
now
that
you
we do
you see
nowadays.
Christmas trees on the curb, December 26th. Everyone goes back to their sort of frenetic life that they had before. Christmas is spent by the day after Christmas, and I think we lost something there.
Well, it is fascinating to hear about this book, and like I say, and all the traditions of the saints and just background and tidbits that you give. So it's fascinating to hear about it. Michael Foley, author of Drinking with St. Nick, Cocktails for Sinners and Saints. Thanks so much for talking with us.
Thanks for having me.
And that wraps up our newscast for tonight. We thank you for watching. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Wyatt Goolsby. We'll be back on Monday with more news from a Catholic perspective. Good night, and God bless.